All right, we are live. Thank you guys for joining us again here at the Pursuit of Purpose Studios for another episode of the What Are We Doing podcast. I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
And we are continuing the series that we've been working with, talking about the lack of independence and lack of ambition, or at least it seems that way, in younger generations.
Right.
And today, what's our angle of discussion for that?
The angle we're going to take is safety, equity, and unintended consequences.
That's a fascinating angle, at least it is to me, and it makes me curious. How could there be a safety issue, as it were, if a person is unambitious?
Right.
How could that relate to being unsafe?
Right. Man, the best way I could think of that, and I'm pretty sure you have thoughts, and if you guys have thoughts, man, please let us know as we move forward in this discussion. But if we think back to a lot of the things that we learned to do, I can't even really remember the origin of some of those things. You know, I mean, I know maybe just like say helping a parent or grandparent work on equipment or whatever, and we're just around and you take those risks. They're like, here, tighten this. And so and eventually you learn what that is and your confidence builds. Well, if you don't put yourself in a position to build those confidences, well, now you're kind of putting the rest of us at risk, because I would like to think that if I had maybe a 20-year-old somewhere in that range, if you will, that there should be some reasonable expectation that they at least understand some things and they can kind of handle it on their own, you know, that they're not so ill-equipped because they haven't taken any risk. So I can see where that could be a safety factor.
And, you know, I think about it like this. When a kid is young, like my oldest son, when he was young, I was ironing some clothes. This was, years and years ago. And believe it or not, for all of you out there, I know how to use an iron. But I was ironing some clothes. And I kept telling him, he kept reaching up there. He was young. I believe he was 2 or 3 years old, maybe 4. He could understand what me telling him no meant. But I kept telling him no. I said, it will hurt you. It'll burn you. I kept telling him no.
Right.
Well, eventually, he found out the natural consequences. And guess what he never did again?
Never reached up there.
He never, ever reached up there when Dad was ironing clothes again.
Right.
And that's one of the things that happens when people, what looks like these generations, when they've been coddled too long or when they've been protected too long,
right,
they don't understand the natural consequences of things. They're ill-equipped. They don't have the tools necessary to have the forethought of, if I do this, then this will happen.
Yes.
Because they've never been put in those mind-evolving circumstances.
Right.
And I always compared that, like, I didn't want him to be burned.
No.
That was the last thing on earth. And I didn't actually let it happen. He did it beyond my control. But it was one of the most valuable lessons that he could have gotten.
Right.
Bo, I'm sorry if you're listening to this. I really didn't want you to carry that scar for the rest of your life, but it kept you from burning yourself worse later on.
I'm sorry. Corny joke alert. Bo knows.
Yeah.
Now Bo knows. If you are from the 90s, you know exactly what I mean by that one.
So while Chuck is aging himself today on this live episode of
gracefully,
our podcast,
I might add.
Yeah. So if any of you out there have a kid, or maybe yourself is in the younger generations, Gen Z or younger, how does this relate to you? Have there been any things that you've experienced, coming into adulthood and moving into life that could have been maybe more safely dealt with had you been better equipped or prepared from childhood?
Right.
Can you imagine anything? I'm just curious, is there anybody in the audience who has metaphorically burned their hand when maybe a lesson earlier on in life might have prevented it?
If my good friend was watching, she would say, "Show him your finger, Chuck." I burnt my finger. I was grilling this weekend and some meat fell on the grill. It fell out of my tongs and I reached to grab it and I knew better. So guess what? Another safety lesson learned the hard way.
Right.
Yeah. So on me.
Another part of this, and with our younger kids, You know, and I'll tell you, as parents, we the older kids we have, they got more experiences with some degree of risk than some of the younger ones. So they learned how to drive four-wheelers, golf carts, you know, motorized things. And, you know, I really think that led them towards the path of independence quicker.
Right.
It also kept them outdoors.
Yes.
And there are, you know, greater health risks involved with playing on, you know, ATVs and things like that. But it also taught them spatial awareness. It prepared them for when they drive a vehicle, they can gauge distance. They can understand how to respond and react properly to other vehicles and items or obstacles on the roadway.
I can remember I was fairly young, maybe early middle school, and we were up at my grandmother's up in North Louisiana, and we were harvesting her some firewood, and we had a trailer, we had a piece of equipment on it, and we were trying to back it into the woods as close as we could to the job. And so I'm actually outside the truck. My dad's like, stand over there, just kind of watch, you know, but don't get behind the trailer. And I did as I was told. Well, somewhere in the midst of him backing this thing in there, he runs over, I think, at least two different small trees, little bitty trees. There wasn't much to them. And I'm looking under the trailer. I said, man, you plowed over that tree. He goes, imagine if that was your leg. I went, oh. And he goes, that's why you don't stand behind the trailer when I'm backing up. Man, I never forgot that. It was just one of those moments where there was a lesson to be taught, and it was just an indirect, kind of a happenstance. But boy, sure, it made an impression. I'm still telling that story.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Well, look, I want to send a shout out to some of our live viewers. Thank you guys for joining us today. I see a lot of names popping up, especially on TikTok. But just to let everybody know, we are available on our live streams on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Kick, X, Instagram, virtually everywhere. So wherever you'd like to find us, let us know. But thank you for being a part of the Pursuit of Purpose audience and family. We appreciate you guys, and we want to hear from you. I'm looking at a statistic here, and it's fascinating. We talk about how people have waited later to drive, and this whole series was inspired by one of my own kids who waited until she still doesn't have her driver's license. She has a provisional at this point, and she's 19 years old. But it was her experience that inspired this series. And I'm reading a statistic here, and we're talking about unintended consequences. Fascinatingly, teen crash deaths are down. Automotive teen crash deaths are down. Well, it stands to reason because there's a lot less teens behind the wheel.
Right.
But on the flip side, the fascinating thing about that is, in the converse, that early 20s deaths, automotive crashes, are way up. So way up. So that's a fascinating thing, that we've got this enormous increase in crashes of young adults in cars because they weren't prepared,
right,
to have that kind of power, that kind of responsibility, that kind of, experience behind the wheel of a car, that type of independence. And then when it's basically thrust on them, they got to learn quick.
Just this last week, I was getting some tire work done. And so I'm just sitting there talking to the technician. We're just chatting about things, just a couple of guys sitting around talking. But we got into the subject of what we're talking about, which is teens driving. And he said, I'm in the car business. That's what I do. And so he hands his son this kind of a manual, the ones where we used to learn the signs and the signals and all those other, all the things that you see posted on highway signs while you're driving down the road. And the kid looked at the book and he said, "What's this?" He goes, "Well, this is how you get started driving." "Well, can I just get behind the wheel?" He goes, "No, you got to know what's out there. When you see a speed limit sign, you need to know what that means." And he kind of went into some other examples of what the signage does. But the kid just want to get behind the wheel. So some of those 20-year-old statistics is, did we not prepare them, and then we just push them out there and go, you know what, just they'll figure it out. Well, it sounds like some of them are figuring out the hard way, and they're hurt, and some of those hurts are irreversible. And so, yes, there is a process to this. And so I challenge even our parents that are listening to, well, I ask you, what do you think is the ideal way for a parent of, say, preteens to teens to put that, I guess, gentle pressure on them, on their teenager to start preparing, to start training, to maybe even to motivate a desire? Is that even doable? Can you even motivate someone to desire something? I don't know. These are just questions.
So, man, the real question is, what are we doing? And what direction are we headed with this? One of the things that I see here in our notes is that the suggestion is that maybe that the younger generation is becoming less reliant on independent automotive transportation because of the rise of ride sharing and the rise of more prolific public transportation and things like that. And what is that going to do for our independence as a nation?
Yeah.
How is that going to be reflected in years to come?
Right.
And what is it going to mean? What is it going to mean legislatively? How is that going to change the way that people view automotive regulations and laws when a person does want that independence? Are we going to sacrifice that in the future because it's becoming a lower priority to a younger generation? And this is a conversation that it may seem strange, but if we don't talk about it, we may lose one of our great American pastimes. Driving vehicles may become less.
Well, it may seem strange in our conversation because we probably have a mostly adult audience, but it's not going to seem strange not too long from now if we keep trending in that direction. Yeah, we're going to have these over-dependent young people on somebody else to compensate for them, especially in the subject that we kind of have used as our primer here, which is transportation. Yeah, and who will that be? Who will be their transporter? And is that something the transporter even wants to do? Now, obviously with some of those industries, was it Uber and some of those, it has created a need to be filled. Now it's created its own industry. But is that really the healthiest conclusion?
What's funny about that is Henry Ford, back when he decided that his goal was to belt the earth in automobiles. That was his vision. But when he asked the population around him, his community, when he asked them what they needed, do you know what they said? They didn't say a car. They said a faster horse. So the people thought they needed a faster horse.
Right.
Until the true concept and availability of the automobile came around. So my question is, where are we headed? Right. What is the next incarnation of the automobile, and how will it materialize?
Right.
Because it really seems like the younger generation is trending some kind of a different way, and I'm not sure what it is.
I don't know.
And it'll be after my lifetime, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Is that what they want? A faster version of a horse? Or do they just want somebody who has a horse to come by and pick them up?
Well, if independence is the goal, is a car the only key? Or is it just one of many? In this modern time, and see, I came at this subject looking at it from my perspective. And as we talk through it, I've begun to understand that maybe independence looks different now. Maybe it will continue to evolve until the automobile is not the independence symbol. It is to me.
Yeah.
But what's next? Isn't that a crazy question?
That is, and one of the, I guess, advantages of an automobile is kind of our slightly disconnected areas of the country, like where we live in Southeast Texas. There's a main city, of Beaumont, but there's all these other communities around us, and they all kind of have their features. But the only way to get there is in motorized vehicle. There's no other way. Other than that, you're just going to live in your little pocket, and you will only experience what gets brought to that. And is that enough for personal growth? And because we talk about independence, of course, its counterbalance is overdependence. But what are we really looking for there? Some kind of interdependence? And yes, vehicle travel is one of those, but maybe it's also communication. Maybe it's also the technologies and things like that. Because there are some people who are very happy living in what we would now call an analog world. They're good with much more simple things. And maybe they've just never been introduced to it. Maybe it seemed overwhelming, or maybe they tried it for a while and they're like, this is too hard to keep up with. I'm just going to go back to the simple way. But people who tend to want to remain in some simple fashion, it speaks to a lack of growth. And so I don't know, are we facilitating that somehow as a society? Are we putting our technicians in a situation where they're coming up with tools and other things that are actually keeping some of that personal development suppressed? Maybe.
So, and the other thing is in our information age, things have changed to the point where, once upon a time, and we've had guests on here that illustrated this in their lifetimes, that once upon a time, if you wanted to learn something, it was going to be through a telephone call or a face-to-face conversation. Mm-hmm. And then that would be repeated and repeated. And then, the rumor mill would spread the news.
Yes.
Or the newspaper or the 6 o'clock news on TV.
Yes.
Not anymore. Not anymore. It's nothing of the kind. The least trustworthy source of news is that square box where we used to get it all.
Right.
And now the fascinating thing is that the most trustworthy sources of news are people like us.
Yeah.
And we are instantaneously available around the world. Mm-hmm. As soon as the mics turn on.
Yes.
And that changes the dynamics of the need for what we call independence.
Right.
It really does. It changes the whole concept.
Mm-hmm.
If I can reach out, as they used to say, reach out and touch someone.
Right.
If I can reach out and talk to someone, if I can reach out and look to someone instantly on the other side of the globe, mm-hmm. it really reduces my drive to drive a vehicle.
Yeah. I can see where that would contribute. And we've had the privilege of interviewing a host of folks, and we appreciate them. We appreciate you, for tuning into some of those interviews, most of which at this point still have come into the studio with us. But there's a growing portion that are actually using technology to enter into our conversation.
Well, I'll give you for instance. We're tomorrow. It won't air tomorrow, but we're going to be interviewing a gubernatorial candidate for another state.
Yes.
Not going to tell you where.
No.
But tune in and stay tuned, because we've got a gentleman that's running for governor of one of the great states of our country.
Right.
And he'll be coming on. He'll be doing his interview tomorrow mm-hmm. remotely, and maybe for all we know, he could be sitting, in his living room.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to make things even more enhanced in that way, you can order everything. You don't even have to go to the grocery store anymore.
Right.
You can get everything: milk, eggs, all your groceries, every kind of clothing you need, all of your toiletries, your bathroom products, everything. You can get custom made everything. Like, there are very few things that you have to go to the store for
right
in person
right
anymore.
I can remember visiting my son, and they live in Austin. And this is years and years ago, and they had a house that they bought, and they kind of flipped it and did some modifications. So it was kind of what I would call like a smart home. They could speak and lights would change and what have you. But that was the first time I had ever been introduced, and I know it wasn't a new thing, but it was new to me, where we show up at their house, we beat them before they got home from work, and there are these two humongous boxes sitting in front of their door. So we call them and say, well, do you want us to do anything with these things? Yeah, just put them in the garage. That's our grocery order. It is dog food and dry goods and what have you. There's only a few things that didn't come that way, but probably could, which would be like their steaks and chickens and stuff. They'd have to stop and get those things. But everything else, delivered. And now, they're not the kind of folks who just sit at home and live like that. They obviously get out to their jobs and what have you. But that was a portion of their life, and it was a whole new awakening. And I was just fascinated by it. I didn't hate it. I just didn't know it. But there it was, right there at the front door, waiting for us when we got there.
Well, I really like America. For the longest time, at least all throughout my lifetime, we have been a vehicular identity society.
Yes.
We identify with what kind of car. In fact, when you meet someone and you talk to them, what kind of car you drive?
Mm-hmm.
Those are you ask them where they work or what they do, mm-hmm. and what their car is. Mm-hmm. Those are the two most common questions that, at least how it was when I was coming up.
Right.
That's how we identify.
Yeah.
And I think that's changing.
It seems to be. Well, but I remember those days when it was like brand loyal to what truck you drove.
Right.
It was almost a fight in the parking lot about this brand over that brand. But yes, that's definitely something that seems to be not as important, at least as the generations tag along behind our generation. For sure.
So the real question is, at least for me, is it the right thing, and is it the best move for our country? Are we sacrificing our is it a reversal of growth? You mentioned it earlier. You said something about almost to the effect that it's a regression.
It seems like it. Is it?
I would really love the perspective of anyone else out there in the audience who has a perspective to offer. What do you think is the reduction of independence as far as vehicular independence? Is that a loss of growth for our country? Are we giving up potential future independence as such? And is it right? Is it the right thing to do to move away from the automotive industry?
And I'll ask one more question on top of that. Or is it opening up doorways for new things we haven't even thought of yet?
Right.
That are maybe taking its place. Do I think that the use of motor vehicles is just going to go away? Absolutely not. I mean, not for a long time. And I don't know about you guys in our audience. I drive our local portion of the interstate system here in the South quite, nearly every day. And we all do to some degree, but I'm on it for a long time. And there are a lot of transport, 18-wheelers and other trucks like that. And they're moving goods somewhere for somebody. And so obviously those things don't seem to be going away anytime soon. But are we trending in a direction? What do you think? Where do you think this is heading?
Well, I'm going to give my opinion. Y'all can thrash me if you want to, but I plan to drive until somebody takes my keys away.
Yes.
And I plan to drive something with an internal combustion engine.
Yeah.
I might have an electric vehicle at some point for the novelty of it, because I do find them to be fascinating.
Yeah.
But I still want to have a motor, an actual engine,
right?
An internal combustion engine in my vehicle.
So I was at that same tire shop, and I'm in the lobby, and I'm talking to folks there, just getting to know them, kind of like what we do. And this gentleman starts talking about how he has yet another octogenarian in his family, so they're into their 80s, pushing 90, and they're now being forced by insurance and other people to take their driving privileges. And so he said, and almost every occasion when either the state police or the insurance company says they can't drive anymore, he said, we tell them, you come tell them this. We're not going to tell Pop all that. He goes, no, your family, that's your job. So I told him, I said, you know what? there's a time when I know that I got resistance from people in my family, and I have a decision to make. Am I going to be compliant, or am I going to be resistant? And I said, I think I'm going to be resistant. I think I want to be, no, I'm still driving. You're not taking my truck away from me, even though I know they're probably going to win anyway when that time comes. And man, I hope it's a long time from now.
One of the biggest things that I see us, if we do really move away from the independence and ability to drive ourselves around, if we really do move that direction, we are going to then become dependent upon whatever information is piped into our homes
Mm-hmm.
as all we get. We open, I believe, and I could be wrong, y'all pitch in, but I believe we open ourselves up to being more controlled. I really do. It seems that way to me.
Yeah. Well, we're giving up some control for sure, because if I'm not facilitating my transportation, somebody else is. That's an example of giving up control. And to me, those things tend to trend in a person, unless there's literally some type of a medical reason a person can't do it. If it's just a willful choice, then I'm giving up control, which means I'm creating a void. Something's going to fill it.
Right.
Is it going to be healthy for me, or is it not? Am I subjecting myself to other things and it may not be specifically about driving, but could I apply that same willfulness to something else? Maybe my medical care, maybe my source of information. You mentioned that earlier. And those things could start trending in a direction, and that probably couldn't end well, very likely. And so it's a little frightening if you think about it. It's a good point.
It could be. And I know that it may seem to some of our audience out there that the conversation may have devolved a little bit, but I don't believe it has. I believe that it's a progressive thing, and it's a growing conversation. But it's important to look at things from as many possible perspectives and angles as you can. And it's important to talk about it with each other, to really talk things out. I see Rick Honeycutt saying it's the kids' jobs to help. If you don't mind, Rick, I agree with you. It's definitely their job to help. And that's one of the things that takes away their independence and their ambition, is not letting them and then not requiring them to help. Is that what you mean, Rick? Is that what you had in mind? Because that's something that I've experienced in my home. Something that my older kids dealt with was they were required to have chores, lots of them. And then some of the younger kids is not as much.
Right.
And then we, being adoptive parents, we then have a little element of pity. Because when you bring a child into your home, we did, you look at those circumstances where they came from, and you think you just want to rescue them, and you just want to give them the best life, and you just want to protect them from the rest of the world because they've already dealt with enough. But the problem is that they still need that challenge. They still need that confidence that comes from the experience of requirements, the experience of accountability and responsibility.
Maybe even more.
And I think that I failed in that regard. I don't think I required enough of my kids. They should have, all of them should have been required to help, not equally, but according to their ability, according to their place, and according to what was needed done around the house.
Right. There's a phrase that I'll use a lot in my counseling and other therapeutic settings, and it's if you're going to love someone, which I believe we do, we all have a host of people that we love, but are you loving them well? So you're mentioning your children as they came into your home, and am I loving them well if I don't give them requirements, consequences, expectations? And because I do look at them with some level of, I guess, and it sounds like maybe a bit of an ugly word, but kind of pity, I remember a good friend of mine, she's a little bit older in my church growing up, and her third child was born with Down syndrome. She was special needs. And she had these two older kids that were pretty healthy. Matter of fact, almost too healthy. They were hyper and all this. They're almost a lot. But she had this third child, and she's at the pediatrician. She's doing the follow-up little visits. And she just broke down in the doctor's office, is what she told me. She said, and that doctor looked at me, looked at that baby. She said, looked back at me, and he said, I'm going to give you the best advice I can give you. When you raise that child, you raise them just like those other two. If she acts up, don't you look at her little face. You turn around so you don't see her little face. You know how they have a unique look, but that bottom looks the same as those other two bottoms, and she will be the better for that. And you know that girl is something else. She actually got a job, kept a job, and now is getting close to retiring from that job, albeit it's in the retail industry. But look at her. She's survived 2 different major medical issues, a heart issue and cancer. And I think a lot of that inner fight that she has came from the fact that her mother loved her well. And now, is she going to be one of those kids that are going to have some of those limits? Like, could she not drive? Probably. But, that's more understandable. However, she gave her every other equipment that she could. So she didn't have that feel sorry moment for too long. And I thought, man, that was very good. So she basically gave her a healthy life because awesome. She didn't see her as a difference any more than life was just going to have to dictate sometimes.
And, we're off topic a little bit about what I'm about to discuss, but it's related. There's a lot of discussion right now in social media, in the mainstream media across our nation, dealing with the autism spectrum, dealing with the potential causes of autism and related things, and I'm not going to get into all that about what the potential causes are. I want everybody in our audience to understand. My wife and I are parents of a child who is on the spectrum. And we went through a period of life in his early life and he's high functioning. Don't get me wrong. He's very high functioning. But we went through a period of life when he was young where we didn't understand him. And as such, we were frustrated. We were frustrated with ourselves. We were frustrated with him. And by all other measurements, he was a typical child. He looked like everybody else. He didn't have any sort of other obvious differences, except he didn't communicate the same. He didn't have the same interests, and he behaved very differently. And at first dealing with him, he seemed defiant. He seemed rebellious. He seemed to have a level of refusal to cooperate that was unlike any of the others. And the poor kid, it took him until he was he much older than what I'd like to admit. I think he was 6 when we discovered that he was truly on the spectrum, and we got some help, and we actually hired a coach to come in and kind of coach us and then coach him.
Okay.
And that coach kind of helped give us some advice about him. And it was beautiful. It's kind of like what you said, the doctor said about that kid with Downs. And the advice was, you have to hold him accountable. You have to, as much as possible, don't be unreasonable. Love him and his beauty the way he is, because he's got special things that he'll be able to do that no one else can do. And I'll give you the follow-up to that in a second. But hold him accountable, and that's the only way that he's going to gain confidence and see his own value.
Right.
And that the amazing thing about that, and I truly believe this with all my heart, he's now independent. He's 24 years old. He made the decision on his own to join the United States Navy. And he is graduating from A school next week as a nuclear technician.
Come on.
So that's to me, it's a beautiful story to be a part of. But the beginning of it, I look back on that and golly, I felt like a failure because I got so impatient. And it's a tough thing to do.
Yeah,
to hold your kids accountable at their level, and their ability, and all kids are different.
But I thank God, and I mean that as a prayer, not a swear. I thank God that you and your wife loved him enough to say there's got to be a better way, and there has to be either both an explanation for what we apparently can't fully see, So you subjected yourself to, evaluations and tests. Okay, at least let me know what we're working with. And then the next best question is, then how do we work with it? And that took courage, because part of that courage was for you and your wife to say, okay, we were not doing it as well as we could.
Right.
Not all wrong, but not as well as we could. And look at the result, and he is, friends, those of you who are tuning in today, he is amazing. He's an awesome young man, very polite, very attentive, but has found a way to maximize the gifts that he's been given by God, his intelligence and his character and his drive. It is so impressive. And I think that is a result of good parenting. That's a result of parents who loved him enough to expect more from him, despite what the world may perceive as kind of a permanent setback. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to behave that way. And look at the result.
And I want everybody out there to understand that I'm also not saying that all kids on the spectrum are the same. They are not.
Yeah.
Each one of them is extraordinarily unique in and to themselves.
Right.
And there are so many parents out there with beautiful babies that are not high functioning.
Yeah.
That they call them, profound on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And my heart goes out to them, and their babies are beautiful, and they have their own ways. They have their own blessings. They have their own abilities. And if nothing else, they have the ability to bring out the beauty inside the parent.
Right.
And
So true.
that by itself is a miracle. It's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
So just be careful out there. I want to give this encouragement to our audience in this time that our nation is talking about some pretty difficult things health-wise. And there's a lot of news being paid, attention being paid to autism. And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be conversations had.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be research done. There needs to be better understanding. But there doesn't need to be blame.
Yeah.
Pointed fingers at a parent or the discussion as though the person who is on the spectrum is any less than anyone else.
Right. And we're going to let research decide cause and effect. But if it's come into your world, as you seem to be implying, Rob, just prayerfully respond to it. Dive into it. And, there may be some common things that you can learn just from people who are very, like the coach, who's very adept, that you guys hired in young children with those specific situations. But then there may just be a uniqueness, because sometimes at the end of the day, just because they may be on the spectrum doesn't mean they don't have their own little unique personalities, just like you would learn any other kid's personality. And if you have more than one child in your home, they're not all the same. And that's our job as flexible adults to figure out who they are and what's the best way to respond to them in love to get the most for them.
And I want to encourage you, if you have a kid, if you are a parent of a child with Downs or a parent of a child on the autism spectrum, find yourself a coach. Find yourself someone, if nothing else, someone that you can talk to,
Mm-hmm.
someone that you can openly express yourself to, that's going to be encouraging, accepting, and understanding.
Yeah.
And that's what a coach does, a specialized life coach in that area. I encourage you to do that, because if you're a parent and you've got a spouse, talking to each other is not going to probably be enough.
Yeah.
All the time. You need an outside party.
And if you want to just make this kind of a broader brush, if there's anything that you're dealing with and you don't have maybe some history of experience with it, that's okay. Go find someone who does, or maybe a host of someone's. That's just why a lot of folks get into a lot of reading and listening and things like that. And sometimes they're hearing things that are fairly repetitive, but there's always those nuggets of something. I didn't really think about it like that. And because if we're not growing, well, we know what the other direction is. And so it's so worth it. But in those specific situations, especially with a special child with some special needs, please go talk to somebody, because if you've never been there before, how would you know? But they may know more. They at least have something.
Well, guys, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for allowing us to become a part of the pursuit of your purpose. Make sure you hit the like, share, and follow buttons on your respective social media. Subscribe to us on YouTube. And then as we close, I'm going to show you guys something. We've got some new merchandise. There's this thing that goes around that I don't know if any of you have ever met us or been a part of the show. If you know us in person, I like to give out these things. It's called a Golden Rule marble. And it's just a reminder. It's something to keep in your pocket, keep on your person, or give as a gift to remind us to treat others as we want to be treated if the roles were reversed. And it's intended to impart empathy on the one who carries it. And it's a great gift. And so now we got them custom made with the Pursuit of Purpose logo and the Golden Rule wrapped around it. They're a solid brass ball. And let us know if you'd be interested in purchasing one. They're not very expensive. And then we got caps. We've got other merchandise and stuff. But wanted to introduce that idea to you guys. We do have a merchandise line now. So if any of you ever have any interest in any Pursuit of Purpose gear, just let us know. Send us a message. Send a text to 409-284-1540. And again, I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
Thank you for allowing us to become a part of the pursuit of your purpose. We'll talk soon.